If Destination X 2011 wasn't proof enough that TNA need to change their announce team, I present to you Against All Odds 2012. Now, this is not a knock on Taz at all. Now, condolences to him for the death in the family, by the way. I think Taz is generally a good commentator most of the time, but him and Mike Tenay just flat out do not work. It's oil and water. There's no chemistry. None. I mean, Mike Tenay is sleep-inducing most of the time, but him and Taz just end up making each other worse. And look how much better the announcing was when you put JB in there instead. I mean, there was no bickering or awkwardness. They just called the show, and it was all right. And at this point, I think Tenay's performance as an announcer pretty much depends on who he's working with. I mean, JB makes Tenay somewhat more tolerable. Taz, unfortunately, makes Tenay worse because of the clash in styles. And I don't blame Taz for that at all. I think the problem is 100% Mike Tenay. He needs to go. I mean, that guy is way past the expiration date. I mean, JB and Taz work pretty well together on Explosion. I think they should be the announce team. I mean, failing that, I'd accept Tenay and JB. At least that would be an improvement. But something needs to change because Tenay and Taz as the announce team is a failed experiment. Anyway, we start out once again with the X Division at 8 p.m. Now, fortunately, there were 2 X Division matches here, so they didn't stick the title match in the curtain jerker spot. Sadly, that's about the only positive you can take away from this. I mean, the match was just getting going when Jesse Sorensen got hurt. He took a bad shot and his neck is all kinds of messed up now. I mean, it looks like he's going to be okay eventually, thank God. But man, that's a rough break. I mean, I don't even feel comfortable talking about the match, honestly, so I'm just going to move on. With the opener ending prematurely like this, the timing of the show was obviously a little screwed up. And this led to other matches getting more time than they were probably going to originally. In some cases, that was a good thing. In the case of the next match, not so much. Robbie E. and Rob Terry come out. Ha-ha! Robbie issued an open challenge, and this got added to the pay-per-view earlier in the day. I don't know why. When I heard about this, I was thinking the opponent would be Anderson or maybe the Pope, you know, a returning star, a debuting new star, just someone, anyone to just please take the TV title off this loser. Shannon Moore was a pretty underwhelming choice, but it's not like this had been hyped up in advance, so there were no expectations. I was hoping so much that someone really impressive would come out and just obliterate Robbie in like 10 seconds and finally put an end to this farce of a title reign. Instead, what we got was a 10-minute snooze fest that served as nothing but a reminder of why this no-talent jackass never should have won the title in the first place. With Robbie being off TV for a while lately, I almost forgot, well, not forgot so much as repressed, how fucking lazy this clown is. I mean, thankfully, Shannon was on the offense for most of this because every time Robbie got on the offense, it was rest hold city. And the match went like this. Shannon would control things for a few minutes, and the action would be passable enough. Then Robbie would take the advantage, and the match would get boring for a while. He'd do some stalling, hit 2 or 3 moves, then go to a rest hold, lather, rinse, repeat. Shannon gets pinned after Rob Terry punches him in the face. I've got nothing against Shannon Moore. At least he was putting in some effort here, but this whole segment was a waste of time. I mean, I've said this before and I stand by it. Robbie E. has not had a single good match since he joined this company. You know, he's been in a couple that were decent because of the other people involved, but put him in a singles match and he phones in his performance every time he goes out there, just like he did in this one. Moving on. Gail Kim versus Tara for the Knockouts title. Madison Rayne came out with Gail, but she left early on. You know, they were fighting because of the communication problems they had 2 weeks ago, and Madison took off. Good. This was a great example of something that I like to call the inverse Rayne effect. I told you guys about the Rayne curse a while back, where everything that Madison touches turns to shit. Well, the inverse Rayne effect is the exact opposite, where the absence of Madison Rayne automatically makes everything better. Madison leaves ringside, and what happens? Gail goes to business with no bullshit and wins the match clean. Gail proves to be a strong champion who doesn't need help to win matches, and Madison Rayne is proven to be completely inconsequential. Works for me. The match was good. You know, I especially liked the last few minutes where they started breaking out the big moves. You know, some good psychology too with Gail targeting Tara's knee and then Tara aggravating the knee when she hit the moonsault. Strong match from these two. I got no complaints. Matt Morgan and Crimson versus Samoa Joe and Magnus for the tag team titles. I do wish this had been a little longer. I mean, the finish seemed to come a bit quickly for me, and it did still feel like they were holding something back, but this was a pretty solid tag match. I do think the outcome was a little bit more obvious than it should have been, though. I mean, the announcers spent the whole match talking about Joe and Magnus, and when JB compared them to beer money, you kind of knew they were going to win. Doesn't mean I wasn't happy to see it, though. And I think it's telling that even though Morgan and Crimson have been the champions up to this point, Joe and Magnus have kind of been overshadowing them in this feud. And I think that's a good indicator that the writers are behind this pairing. I like the finish a lot with Crimson spearing Morgan by accident. It led to the heels getting the clean win, which is never a bad thing. It also served as a nice tease to their eventual breakup, as well as a Crimson heel turn. Did you see how at the very end, where Crimson sort of shook his head at Morgan and turned away while he was leaving? That just seemed heelish to me, and I absolutely think Crimson would be better as a heel, so I liked that a lot. I didn't think they'd go that route with them this soon, though. I thought they'd want to stretch this out a little bit more. I mean, since Joe and Magnus still have no other teams to feud with, I don't think it'll be the end of the feud just yet. My guess is this will go one more month, and then they'll do Crimson versus Morgan at Lockdown. And I have no idea who Joe and Magnus will feud with after that. Hopefully the Motor City Machine Guns if Sabin is back by that point. In the meantime, there's new tag team champions, and I love it. The only thing these guys are missing is a team name. I've heard a couple of suggestions. I've heard the Deadly Alliance. I've heard the Joe Nuss Brothers, which is kind of funny. I call them the Joe Daddies. You know, because it's Samoa Joe and the Mag Daddy. Plus, it sounds like GoDaddy.com. You know, the Joe Daddies. What? I don't think it sounds gay. Austin Aries versus Alex Shelley for the X Division title. I don't know what else needs to be said about this one. Match of the night? Possible early match of the year contender for this company. I mean, this was the X Division match they should have had at Bound for Glory, damn it! And great near falls, great psychology, great story too with Aries going after Shelley's neck. And that was actually set up a few weeks ago when Shelley wrestled Zema Ion, how he was selling the neck after the match. So the seed was planted back then, even though the announcers never mentioned it. And what made this such a nail-biter was that this was really the first time since he won the title that we saw Aries start to lose his composure and get frustrated, like he wasn't sure if he could really beat this guy. This is one of the things that makes Aries so great, that he can actually sell stuff like that convincingly. But he still won the match, and he did it clean too. And stuff like that is what makes Aries such a great champion. Austin Aries is the best booked champion in this company right now, and it's not even a contest. Alex Shelley may not have won the title, but he didn't lose anything either, because he had an awesome showing. And I don't expect that to be the end of this either, especially now with Sorensen out. I mean, this was the best part of the pay-per-view, and I'm glad it got to be fairly high on the card, because it deserved to be. Then we had AJ Styles versus Kazarian. You know, the match was terrific, but unfortunately the story was kind of working against them. I mean, it's been made clear that Kazarian isn't really a bad guy in this situation. He's only doing this because Daniels is blackmailing him or something. So if Kaz is sort of a sympathetic figure right now, then you had no true heel in this match. And as a result, the audience really didn't know how to react. And when you're in the impact zone where the fans are completely horrible on general principles, that's the last thing you want. I mean, sure, Daniels was getting a lot of heat at ringside, but this still ended up shining a light on how they need to move this story to the next chapter now. I mean, I was disappointed that they didn't reveal what Daniels had on Kaz here. I mean, like I said before, I think they've gone as far as they can with this story without adding a new wrinkle to it. I'm hoping they'll do that this Thursday. Otherwise, this angle may start to lose me a little bit. Nevertheless, still a great match. Good thing, too, because I knew I needed to hold on to that for dear life to get me through what was coming up next. Gunner versus Garrett Bischoff. Whoever was responsible for putting this match second to last on the card, I hope you feel like an idiot right now. Even with the opening match ending early, I am absolutely baffled that this got so much time. And for anyone out there who still doesn't believe that this is more about giving Bischoff and Hogan a reason to be on TV than anything else, let me ask you this. Why did Garrett come out to Hogan's music? Huh? Just saying. Maybe after Wembley, management realized that a lot of fans are seeing right through Garrett's push and figured that was the only way they could get people to cheer for him. And they were probably right, but anyway. After the Hogan-Bischoff thing, the other big complaint about this is that Garrett is getting pushed way too hard, way too soon for all the wrong reasons. And I would like to thank Garrett for proving that argument absolutely 100% right. I mean, maybe the guy didn't embarrass himself like a Lacey Von Erich or something, but after watching this match, does anyone really think he belonged in a semi-main event spot getting this much time?
This whole show is ridiculous!
Aries and Shelley blew the roof off the place. AJ and Kaz had a great match. And then you have Gunner trying to carry a rookie whose entire repertoire is punches, drop kicks, and arm drags. Look, I don't hate Garrett Bischoff. I know this probably isn't his fault, but it really doesn't matter how they try to spin it. He is just not ready for this spot, and it shows. Now, thankfully, someone came to their senses here, because the finish was exactly what should have happened. Gunner spent the whole match beating the guy down and won clean. But the post-match stuff was driving me nuts. I mean, they're going on and on and on about how poor Garrett showed so much heart, and he was battling through a neck injury, and he could be out for a long time. Meanwhile, Jesse Sorensen is at the hospital with a broken neck, can't even move his legs yet, and they're trying to make us feel sorry for Garrett Bischoff?
Oh, what a bunch of bull...
I'm sorry, but that put a fucking bad taste in my mouth. In light of what happened to Sorensen, this just felt like it was in really poor taste. At any rate, they were selling that Garrett might be gone from TV for a while, and that sounds good to me. Bye, Garrett. Say hi to the OVW trainers for me. And ask Taylor Hendricks why she won't return my calls. Then they had the main event, James Storm, Bully Ray, Jeff Hardy, and Bobby Roode for the world title. You know, a year ago, I never thought I'd be saying this, but goddammit, Bully Ray is starting to make me root for him to win the world title. I mean, James Storm absolutely should be next in line, but holy shit, Bully Ray is entertaining right now. That guy has just been on fire with his character lately. I mean, he's practically... Hey! You shut your trap, asshole! I don't need you doing this part. Continue. As I was saying, all four guys worked hard here. It wasn't a bad match, but there were a couple problems. Number one, the audience really didn't give a shit at that point, which made the whole atmosphere feel lackluster. And number two, the referee gets taken out, and then there are several pin attempts made. Sting refuses to count for Bully Ray, refuses to count for Jeff Hardy, but then he counts for Bobby Roode?
What the fuck?
Why? Man, somebody really didn't think that one through very well, did they? Now, believe it or not, I actually did like the finish, because you had Bobby Roode win the match by outsmarting Sting, basically doing what he had to do to get the pin. Not just keep the title, but get the pin. Yeah, it was overbooked, but this was the big complaint that I had about Bobby Roode so far, that he looked like a weak champion because he was satisfied with keeping the title via countouts and DQs and all that other crap, but here, however convolutedly it was booked, he kept the title because he won the match, and that's what's been missing from his title reign, so I like that. It's just a shame that the previous business with Sting not counting for the other pin attempts kind of took away from it. But you know what? Generally, I felt pretty positive about Against All Odds. I liked it more than Genesis. It wasn't perfect, and the crowd sucked most of the time, but there were a couple good matches, a couple great matches, and there were mostly clean finishes too, which I think we'll be seeing more of now considering the news that just broke, which I'll talk about in the Impact review, so stay tuned for that. It'll be starting... now. So, Vince Russo's gone. I knew that by the time I chimed in on this, about 1 million other people would have already done it and pretty much covered all the bases, so I don't know if there's much else that needs to be said. My reaction to the whole thing... I'm kind of nonplussed about it, to be honest. I think anyone who's expecting huge, sweeping changes in the product now, and for the quality of the show to immediately skyrocket, is jumping the gun a little bit. And personally, I think we've already seen the major changes. I mean, they happened when Pritchard took over creative. Yeah, Russo was still the head writer, but Pritchard was telling him what to do. And just from that, we've already seen a lot of changes. And for the most part, I've been really enjoying the show since then. And now Russo's out, Lagana's in, and I expect any further changes we see from now on are going to be more subtle. I am optimistic that we may have finally seen the last of the object on a pole match, the person in a cage suspended above the ring match, and the myriad of other gimmicky bullshit that Russo spearheaded, but that stuff had already been de-emphasized anyway. And more than anything else, I think we'll be seeing more attention to detail with story and character continuity, because that's an area where Russo really slacked off in the last couple years. But right now, all I can do is speculate. I think it'll be a few weeks before we get a clear picture, because this episode and the next one were probably written before this happened. Yeah, so that first show 2 weeks from now is going to be real interesting. I don't know how good of an indicator this episode was for what we can expect, but I liked it. I'll say that much. The opener was pretty quick and to the point. Bobby Roode comes out and gloats about how he won it against all odds. Then Sting comes out and books him in a no DQ match with Jeff Hardy that was going to start right after the break. Now, some people may complain about this not being the main event, and I do understand that, but I actually like this. I mean, yeah, it was an unconventional way to book something like that, but I'm all for unpredictability when it makes sense. And this did make sense to me. Sting was pissed off, and he wanted to stick it to Bobby Roode right off the bat. Plus, with the way Roode had been retaining the title lately, Sting wanted to start the match immediately so Roode wouldn't have time to find another loophole or whatever to escape with the belt. And the no DQ stipulation was to prevent that as well. Yeah, that's how I saw it anyway. And there is something to be said for starting the show off with a bang. I mean, compare this to that boring-ass verbal debate that started Raw last Monday, where all the guys in the Elimination Chamber are just standing around, reciting cliched, repetitive, overwritten dialogue. In the blink of an eye, everything can change. I just might walk into the Elimination Chamber as an afterthought, but I just might walk out of the Elimination Chamber the new WWE Champion. Yes, Kofi, we know what the rules of the match are. My God, if you're not going to give this guy something interesting to say, don't even hand him a microphone in the first place. So then Roode and Hardy have their no DQ match. I definitely appreciated that they kept it simple and resisted the urge to bring out trash cans and wheelbarrows full of weapons. I mean, that whole garbage wrestling style is completely played out in this era. It's just cartoonish and silly now, so that was a big plus. Not sure where the Kurt Angle thing came from, but if this gets Hardy out of the title picture, that's all I care about. I mean, Hardy was more dominant than I would have liked here, but it was a really nice match, and Roode got the pin again, which is a very good thing. The one thing I would have changed, though, was the timing of Angle's appearance. I mean, him attacking Hardy on the floor just seemed kind of awkward to me. I mean, they should have waited for a minute and had Angle show up right when Hardy was on the turnbuckle about to hit the Swanton. And that would have been a more dramatic way to end this, in my opinion. But whatever, it was still a strong segment. They spent a lot of time on this, too. And by the time they got through the Roode Sting promo, Roode versus Hardy, and Kurt Angle showing up, we were almost 40 minutes into the show. And as a result, this felt really significant. Yeah, when you actually take your time and focus on certain things like this, it's a lot more effective in getting stuff over than if you're just blasting through segments at breakneck speed. Something Russo never understood. So maybe it did go kind of long, but I like this segment a lot. Then they got serious for a minute. They showed a video package to fill people in on Jesse Sorensen's injury, how serious it was, and that it looks like he's going to be okay, thank God. It was a pretty classy thing to do. Just taking a minute to tip their hat to the poor guy, let the fans know what happened to him and how he's doing. It was nice to see that, and I thought it made up for how they kind of made light of his injury with the Garrett Bischoff angle last Sunday, and that was good of them to do that. This was followed by an X Division tag match with Aries and Ion versus Shelley and Shannon Moore. So I guess Shannon Moore is going to be filling Jesse Sorensen's spot for the time being. I don't have an issue with that. I would have preferred they use Tony Nese for this, but whatever. Fun match for the 4 minutes it lasted. Zema Ion continues to stand out every time he's on screen. Did you see how bent out of shape he got when Shannon Moore used his hairspray? Oh man, this guy is a riot. Anyway, the heels won. I'm definitely a proponent of Ion, so I like that he got the pin. Plus, he is the #1 contender, so that only makes sense. I don't agree with Alex Shelley eating the pin, though. And with Sorensen out for the foreseeable future, Shelley's your top X Division babyface by a huge margin. You haven't even tried to build up anyone else. So, unless there's a larger story playing out here, I really don't understand why you're having Shelley get pinned when you got Shannon Moore standing right there. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me, but we'll see where it goes. Then was the 10 knockout Battle Royal match for a title shot. It's a little frustrating to me that they can do this for the singles title while the knockout tag titles haven't been defended in months, but that's nothing new. Honestly, I really didn't care for this match. It was sloppy at times, due in no small part to one knockout in particular who lasted until the very end, unfortunately, and how it was put together really didn't do the women any favors. I mean, the end portion called for Velvet Sky to get beat down by the two heels and then make this big triumphant comeback, but as we've learned countless times by now, this is not something that Velvet does well. Her timing is atrocious, her offense is just embarrassing, and she has just never gotten any better. So Velvet Sky thinks she has the match won, God help me. And then Madison Rayne jumps in and eliminates her. So now Madison Rayne is the #1 contender. So Madison Rayne is getting the title shot. And even if Gail manages to carry her to a decent match, there's Velvet Sky waiting in the wings. So we're fucked either way. TNA, why are you doing this to me? Did I do something to offend you? Is this payback for something? Because whatever it was, I apologize. Why? 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 In the name of all that is holy, when you have a knockout roster this talented, do you continue to push these two women over and over and over again? There isn't even room for debate here. They are the two worst women you have. You know, I don't like Velvet Sky, but at least she gets over. I'll give her that much. Velvet has a lot of fans. But what in God's name is Madison Rayne bringing to the table here? For fuck's sake! At least Sarita lasted until the end. That's the only silver lining I can come up with here. Anyway, fast forward a little bit, and the main event is James Storm versus Bully Ray for the #1 contendership to the world title. And this is why I was okay with Rude versus Hardy going on first, because that was wrapping up a feud, and this was hyping a future one. Now, I do think saving Rude versus Hardy for Victory Road instead would have been a better idea than what they're probably going with, but it is what it is. This was a slower-paced match, but we'd already had a lot of wrestling on this show, so that didn't bother me. Bully Ray doesn't do anything halfway as a heel. I mean, he didn't just tear off Storm's knee pad, he tore off Storm's boot and everything, and then just started going to town on the guy's leg. And give Bully Ray credit, he knows how to get people over. So in terms of psychology, this was dead on, even though it wasn't necessarily the most exciting match ever. Ultimately, though, Storm wins, so Storm is a #1 contender. Awesome. Then they did the Brandon Jacobs thing, which was awfully transparent, admittedly, but that doesn't really matter, it was harmless enough. I mean, the ratings haven't been stellar lately, so I guess you can't really blame them for trying something like this. I mean, they'll get a SportsCenter plug out of it, so whatever, it didn't hurt anybody. Then Sting comes out in the final segment to announce when Storm will get his title shot, and he says it's going to be James Storm versus Bobby Roode for the world title at Lockdown. Hell yeah. And then Bobby Roode just gets pissed off and lays Sting out, which was the perfect way to end this show in my opinion. It made Roode look like a bastard, it announced the main event of Lockdown way early, and it set up what is presumably going to be the main event of Victory Road. Those first two things, great. Fantastic. The last part is where I kind of have to take issue with this. Now, the last pay-per-view before Lockdown used to be Destination X, now it's Victory Road. Traditionally, it's more or less a Lockdown pre-show where they start to get all their ducks in a row for that pay-per-view, and that's great for Lockdown, but this pay-per-view tends to really feel like it lacks importance because of that. And it doesn't have to be that way. You know, it's good that you want to make Lockdown look special, but you don't have to throw this pay-per-view under the bus to do it. But that's what usually happens, and unfortunately, it's what's happening here. James Storm is the #1 contender, but he gets his shot at Lockdown, and presumably the title won't be defended until then. Of course, you need a main event for Victory Road in the meantime, and it's looking pretty likely that it's going to be Bobby Roode versus Sting in a quote-unquote grudge match where there's nothing at stake and no consequence to who wins or loses. So we're supposed to pay $35 to see Sting get back in the ring and wrestle Bobby Roode when there's nothing on the line? How is that interesting? I mean, hell, why not put the title at stake there? I mean, Bobby Roode needs to win that match anyway, so you might as well. I mean, at least that would add a little bit of drama. If the title isn't up for grabs, then I hope they'll do the smart thing and make it so that the winner and loser of that match will have some kind of bearing or ramifications on Lockdown. Then at least there would be some kind of intrigue there. But if it's just a match for the sake of doing Roode versus Sting, I'm sorry, but that's boring. mean, the novelty of Sting getting back in the ring has long since worn off. You can't sell a pay-per-view on that. And you better stack the undercard if that's your main event. But none of this has been announced yet anyway, so we'll see what happens. I like this episode a lot, actually. Good wrestling, pay-per-view hype, the pacing was tight for the most part. I mean, there was a little bit of filler, but not that much. And there were these two stupid pre-tapes with Eric Young and ODB that didn't seem to have any point to them whatsoever, but they were mercifully brief. As was Bischoff's promo. He came out and gloated about Gunner kicking Garrett's ass. I didn't care about this at all, and judging by how the ratings dropped like a rock for that segment, I wasn't the only one. But Bischoff kept it pretty short, he didn't go on forever, and Garrett stayed off-screen this week, so it wasn't a big deal. So there was that, and I didn't like the outcome of the Knockouts match, but still a really strong show this week, and I'm feeling positive about this new direction they're going in. But I have to admit, I am actually feeling a little bummed out about this change that happened. Not that I'm sad about Russo leaving. God, no. But there's a bit that I do in these videos. It's one of my favorites, actually. And with Russo now gone, I can't do it anymore. Oh well. Once more for old time's sake.
Oh shit! It's Vince Russo! What the hell is this all about?
The end of an era.